That's why we made this. Thanks for checking it out. In just a minute, someone is going to give a short talk that hopefully resonates with you and helps you interpret what it might mean to follow in the way of Jesus, because that's what this community is all about. Figuring out what it might look like to live life the way that Jesus did, except in our current context with like cell phones and self-driving cars and stuff. We're a community where everyone is invited, included, and involved no matter what. And though our physical location is in the budding metropolis of the Tri-Cities, wherever you're watching this from, we want to invite you to bring a bit of heaven into your part of the world. Thanks for catching us on the interwebs. If you're looking for more content, follow us on social media or keep checking our website for all kinds of resources that we hope are helpful. Now,
bright as the sun, just drawn in the clips. I haven't seen light in a while. Hasn't been bright in a while. Risk.
Well, hey, good morning. Welcome to Eastlake. For those of you who are in person, welcome to those of you who are watching online or on replay. We're glad that you made it as well. If you are watching online or on replay, what you missed just a few minutes ago was a baptism, Angela's baptism, which you'll be able to watch if you kind of check your Eastlake Weekly this week. But it was, have you ever gone to Home Depot or Lowe's and looked at something and you're like, yeah, that can fit in my car. I think we'll be all right. And then you get it out to the car and you put it in, and you're like, I don't know if that's going to fit. And you just slam it and you hope that it does. That's essentially what just took place in that baptismal tank. We figured out how tall is too tall for this baptismal tank. And I don't know if you could tell, my eyeballs, I just got big, like, oh, what are we going to do? I'm like right here. I'm pushing him down. He's fighting to get back up to breathe. We made it, but it was risky there for a bit. So kudos to him. He's got a great story and a great guy. So, hey, if you're a first-time guest, we promise not to do that to you. We'll find one that fits for you. And we are so thankful you'd come out and be a part of checking out a church for people who don't typically like church. We started a series last week called OMG. It's a series on idolatry, and I spent all last week basically just trying to convince you that idolatry was a relevant issue, because it can definitely feel like that is not a relevant issue. Like for me to just step up and be like, all right, who all struggles with idolatry? Who has idols in their basement? And you're like, all right, guilty. Nobody raised their hands and be like, I do. I don't know how you knew, but it doesn't feel like that. And what we said instead was that anything can be an idol. Idolatry is simply the struggling, the difference of allegiance is what consumes my time. What is in the place of God that shouldn't be there when I have all of these things in my life about completeness and fulfillment and satisfaction in life, and this is what's going to make me finally happy, because we're all on a happiness quest. Right? And if it's anything other than God, then it's not in the right spot, and we're always going to be dissatisfied in that way. And we said that idols tend to push against proper boundaries. This is things that are good. When we make them great, when we make them ultimate, then they become bad. So idolatry isn't just like bad things. It's constantly good things. It's really good. Like your career is great. I think you should be a really good employer or employee or whatever. You should get some satisfaction from your job. You should get paid well, all of those things. But we've seen when those boundaries get pushed and when it becomes a little too aggressive, a little bit too, hey, you're too into your job, not enough into your family, you're too into your job, not enough into your own self-care, too into your job, too into this marriage, too into all the kinds of different options and avenues for us to invest undue amounts of time, attention, focus. We're too elated when things are going too well. We're too disappointed, distraught, despair, sorrowful, all of those things when things go south on those things, when those things are taken away from us, when we lose the job, when we lose the relationship, when we lose money, when we lose this, then we're like, I don't know how I'm going to survive. That probably just proves that we probably love that thing incorrectly, an incorrect form of love, as Augustine would say, disordered loves. We love something inappropriately. Not that it's inappropriate, but we loved it in an inappropriate level and therefore idolized it or made it a counterfeit God in our life. And so what we said for this series is we're going to look at a couple specific ones and talk about how those they resonate for us. And so today we are going to be talking about romantic love, marriage, companionship love, sex, all of those things kind of wrapped into one sort of deal. It's always been possible and likely for people to make romantic love and culture, the culture of love, a counterfeit God in a way, but we live in a culture that especially makes it easy to do this, to mistake love for God, to be swept up by it, to rest all of our hopes and our happiness upon it, for when it's taken out from under us, to be so full of despair, inconsolable, I don't know what I'm going to do. I loved him, I loved her, all of those things. and perhaps it's out of place, right? So I just ask you to listen to all of it, and then we'll decide at the end. You can make your own judgment call for whether it's relevant for you or not. But a few years ago, I did read a book called Mavericks at Work, and in it, it talked about how in classical learning, instead of coming up with like 7 bullet points to be brave, they just gave you Beowulf and said, read it, and you'll be brave. You'll be braver as a result of hearing this story and this narrative. So with that same approach, we're going to look at a story today. I'm going to read through a large chunk of text. I'm not going to stop and offer commentary in between all that much. I will do some more at the end, but I just want to give you all of it, and then we'll kind of do some thought, pull some inferences from this, and hopefully address this idea of love. But I do want to preface it and give you some context for it, so we're not coming out of the blue on it. It's an Old Testament story. It shows up in the book of Genesis about midway through or just after midway through. It focuses on a guy. The protagonist in the story is a guy named Jacob. Jacob was one of the sons of Isaac. Isaac was one of the son of Abraham. Abraham was the guy in the Old Testament that kind of got this whole thing started, right? God did the whole creation thing, and all of a sudden, in the middle of nowhere, God calls Abraham out of Ur and into this, and he brings him out and looks under the night sky and says, see all these stars? You can't even count them. Your descendants are going to be as numerous as these stars. He goes through this. I am going to bless you. You are going to be a blessing to the world. I'm going to love the world through you. You are going to be my hands and feet, not you specifically, but your nation, your progeny, your descendants, all of your family is going to be so numerous, and it's going to be known as Israel, as we come to find out later. And you're going to bless the world. I'm going to bless the world through you, and you're going to be the blessing. Anyways, that's the whole story. It's going to go through your line, your descendant line. So your firstborn son is going to have another son, and this is going to web out into this massive sort of family. And so it starts. Abraham has Isaac. There's the story of that conception, that birth story, and him taken up on Mount Moriah and almost sacrificing him. This crazy story. Isaac then marries Rebekah. They have 2 kids, and they have twin boys. And there's one who is going to be a few minutes older than the other, and it's going to cause some controversy in the family. As it does. I have twins. My son is 5 minutes older than my daughter, and he reminds her of it all the time. And it's the first thing they say when they meet somebody. Hi, my name's Grayson. I'm 5 minutes older than Jovi. That's basically how the whole thing works out. So there's controversy. And Jovi takes it. She's fine with it. Yep, he's older than me. And we're always like, he looks older. He's like 4 inches taller than her, but it really plays some mind games with all of them. In this scenario, this is a significant thing because he has 2 sons here, Esau and Jacob. And early on in this whole scenario, once they find out that they're pregnant, there's this prophecy that comes from God, as it shows up in Scripture, where God says, all right, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to favor the younger one over the older. Or he's going to say, Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated. There's going to be this whole flipping of the script. Typically, the firstborn son got all, not just the carrying on the name, but a majority of the inheritance went to the firstborn son in this day and age. They got 80% of it, and everybody else, whether they were boys or girls after that, got 20% to split up with them. Now, as an oldest son, I feel like this is a great idea. We should go back to biblical scenarios and why let's be spiritual in this matter. But I understand the flip side of things going, hey, they're our mom and dad too. So anyways, whatever. But in this scenario, though, he clearly, there's a demarcation out that God says, I'm going to have favor on Jacob and not on Esau in this way. And yet Isaac decides on a personal level, I'm going to favor, in spite of this, I'm going to favor Esau over Jacob. And it causes this controversy. Isaac doesn't really like Jacob. Jacob knows it. Jacob's got all the love from his mom, and he's kind of a mama's boy in this way. And Esau's the hunter, the gatherer, and he likes to farm and fish and all this kind of stuff. And it comes time when Isaac's about to die, and he's getting old in age, and he can't see. And the story is kind of familiar if you grew up in church. And he brings in his oldest son to kind of pronounce the blessing, which for them was this oral tradition to kind of pass on, say a prayer of blessing. And they believed that as these words themselves had some power. When they left the body, you couldn't bring them back. That's why you don't speak ill of somebody, because that kind of goes out into the world and continues to do ill, and you can't take these things back. But when I go and I pronounce a blessing, it does the work of blessing the son, and that's why when curses on the other way operate the other side. Jacob gets, his mom finds out that the dad's about to do the blessing for Esau. She says to him, hey, come here, put on this animal skin on your arm, because your dad can't really see really well. So he's going to hear you, and he's going to be like, doesn't sound like Esau. Come here, let me feel your arm. And apparently, he had such hairy arms that goat hair felt similar, which is really impressive when you think about it. For him to reach out and be like, no, that is definitely Esau. I can feel that rug. You know what I mean? That's impressive. But at that point, he's convinced and he deceives his father. He pronounces the blessing. Jacob eventually finds out because Esau comes in and says, and Jacob says, I already gave you the blessing. It's like, Isaac. Isaac says, no, I didn't. I already gave it to you. And he says, like, I was out hunting. You did not give it to me. It's like, oh my gosh, we've been deceived. Jacob deceived us. Literally, the word Jacob means deceiver later on. So it totally makes sense, but he's done this. He's in hot water. Esau wants to kill him now. And so he flees from where he's at. He goes to the other side of the Fertile Crescent, out of kind of the land of milk and honey, and into the far distant where Rebekah's from. It's her distant family. He's just trying to survive. He comes across some family members, some like far-off family members, and he begins to kind of do some work for them. One is named Laban. He's like a cousin, uncle, whatever. It's a weird web, but he's working for him. That's where we pick up our story. I know it's like from a water hose or fire hose or whatever, but it's important because that whole kind of stuff is going to play back into this story, all right? All right, Genesis chapter 29, verse 16. Here's what it says. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak. We'll come back to that in a second. But Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance, and ate whatever she wanted and never seemed to affect her, no matter what. And she's like, oh, I'm starving. Oh, it must be nice for you that you're starving. Right? Anyways, all right. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man. Stay with me. Work for me 7 years. 7 years, by the way, a huge sum of money, about 2 or 3 or 4 times the traditional bride price. They would say, here's 16 cows. I want to marry your daughter, right? This would be so much. He's like, I don't even want to negotiate with you. This is what I'm doing. She's way too beautiful. I can't get my eyes off of her. Let's go, right? All right, then he goes on. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days. And that's when we all go, oh, that's so nice, because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, that I may go into her, for my time is completed. So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. But in the evening, he took his daughter Leah. This is what you see that? There's a little foreshadowing coming on. And he brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. And in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, what is this you've done to me? Did I not serve you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? Then he goes on. Laban said, it is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. There's a proper order to these things. I don't know how they do it over where you're from, but here we do things our way. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other one also in return for serving me another 7 years. Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his female servant Bilhah. I hope you're taking notes. This is Zilpah, Bilhah. All right. To his daughter Rachel to be her servant. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah and served Laban for another 7 years. Then he goes on. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb. But Rachel was barren. Hated by who? By probably both the dad and Jacob, right? Gosh, you're in the way. Everybody wants Rachel, nobody wants you. So what am I going to do with you, right? He opened her womb, but Rachel was barren, and Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, because the Lord has looked upon my affliction. For now my husband will love me. Now, this is what I ultimately want. This is what's going to bring me fulfillment. I just want a husband that loves me. Therefore, I'll have kids and we'll figure it out. She conceived again and bore a son and said, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. She keeps having these kids, keeps saying the same thing. Now, my husband will love me. Now, finally, maybe it's quantity issue. It's a quantity. Reuben was a kind of an idiot anyways. Now we've got Simeon. Now it's fine, right? Again, she conceived and bore a son and said, now this time my husband will be attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. This repetition, this constant dissatisfaction with this. Therefore, his name was called Levi, and she conceived again and bore a son and said, this time I will praise the Lord. Therefore, she called his name Judah. Then she ceased bearing. There's a ton of things going on in this, right? This is a very ancient story. There's a lot of cultural patriarchal stuff. We could address all of that in a different time, and bride price and all that, blah, blah, blah. But assuming that this is assuming that's all kind of up for grabs anyways, let's talk about some of the significant things that I think have some modern implications for us. That being, one of them being, Laban recognizes in Jacob some management material. He says, I think you're worth you're a good laborer. I would love to have you work for me. How do we strike a deal? I don't want you to leave for nothing. I want you to stay here and help me, build up my empire. What's it going to take? And immediately the response from Jacob in this scenario was just simply one word, and it's Rachel. I want Rachel. I want your daughter, Rachel, Rachel, Rachel. And what we know, again, is beautiful in form and appearance. He offers an exorbitant bride price for her. And I think in that moment, Laban recognizes we've said idols push us to boundaries beyond appropriateness. Idols make us imbalanced in a certain direction. Idols make us do crazy things, and we've seen people throw away careers for these affairs. They throw away marriages for, this kind of stuff, this kind of fulfillment or anticipated fulfillment has caused us to do some delirious sort of thinking in terms of ways of living our life out. And I think Laban recognized this in Jacob and sees kind of the early effects of this and thinks, I can take advantage of this. And so he agrees to this idea of, sure, Rachel, that sounds great. And then at the end of 7 years, and you can imagine Jacob's probably had this marked on his calendar, as you would if you'd been working for 7 years for something or someone. Like a 7-month engagement feels like a long time. You know what I mean? Can you imagine 7 years of this? Jacob comes up to Laban and says, give me my wife. Look at the language of this. Give me, not your daughter, give me my wife, that I may go into her, for my time is completed. This is very aggressive language. I've done a lot of weddings before. You know how the dad walks the daughter down? And then I'm always at the front, usually with the groom, and I motion to the groom. I'm like, all right, go take the woman or whatever. That's kind of a traditional, not everybody does, but some people do it, right? And they go, and they walk up, and I always watch them have a little conversation with each other, like the dad and then the groom, right? And I don't know, it's not audible, nobody's mic'd, it's probably good. I don't know what's said there. Take care of my daughter. I own 14 guns. I don't know how this works. Something, right? I don't remember even my own. I did it, but I don't remember because you're just in a daze and you're just like, I'm about to get married. This is kind of a big deal. But I can't imagine in that moment the brusque nature of the audacity of the groom in that scenario to be like, give me my wife, right? That's real aggressive. Commentators are like, when they say, give me my wife, I want to go into her, it's like, give her to me, I want to have sex with your daughter. That's essentially the blatant disregard for, all this going on. Anyways, why does he say it in this way? Why is he so aggressive? Why is he willing to speak in this way, to work for 7 years, pay 4 times the bride price? Why is he not talking about negotiating a salary, but then also, hey, just so you know, in addition to the salary, I'm also interested in tying myself closer to your family through marrying one of your daughters, specifically Rachel. This is dominating his thoughts. He can't get over this. He's obsessed in this way. Why is he doing this? It's probably how he's dealing with some failure in his life, right? Well, think about it in this way. Perhaps he feels like my life has been kind of empty. I've never had my father's love. I was supposed, this prophecy was about me, but yet my dad clearly had favoritism towards my older brother. Older, not really older. Come on, 5 minutes, whatever. I love, my mom clearly loved me, but that's no longer here. I'll never probably see her again, and we don't think that he ever did. He's probably struggling with all of this, and then he lays his eyes on the most beautiful woman he's ever seen, and then he probably said to himself internally, man, if I had her, you know what, that would be a game changer. I feel like my life would finally be complete, that I would have that thing that I've constantly been looking for. Right? And you too will write a song about it someday. And it'll be like, I finally found what I was looking for, right? And this is it. And this is powerful. This is the moment. If I had her, it would fix things. There's a sociologist named Ernest Becker who writes about how he's an atheist, and so his opinion is, here's the deal. We used to have God, or the idea of a God, to provide us with a sense of transcendence, to give our lives purpose and meaning. And now that we've realized, according to him, that we don't have God, that the God doesn't exist, we've had to find and put that hope and fulfillment elsewhere. And way more likely for us is to look to sex and romance to give us this kind of transcendence and sense of meaning that we used to get from faith in God. He termed it apocalyptic romance. And is our society better defined in any way than exactly this? This is why it's worth everything for you to find the person that you love. Disregard your marital vows, your commitments, your kids. You've got to pursue you and sexual fulfillment for you above anything else. because that will give you the sense of meaning that you've so often been missing. Apocalyptic sort of romance. My wife and I love the Moulin Rouge movie, right? And in that is like this, it's all about love. And perhaps we watched it when we were like dating and engaged, and so that's how it rings true. But in there, the song is like this combination of every famous love song ever. It's called the something melody. Anyways, love is a many splendid thing. Love lifts us up where we love. All you need is love, right? And we love that. We sing it in the car. She does. I drive. Anyways, it doesn't matter. We maintain the fantasy, though, that if we, not just me, like this is all of us, right? This is just culture in general. If we have the lucky nature of finding our one true soulmate, everything wrong with us will finally be healed. And if I just had that, then I would be okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that is prime territory. That is prime soil, fertile soil for a counterfeit God or an idol in our life or something that has causes us to change our perspective on this sort of thing. If you hear yourself saying that, if I just had that, happiness would finally come. If I just had that, and then you figure out how to finance it, and then it doesn't, right? And then you're like, crud, that wasn't it. That's it. No, in the arena of like personal relationships, sexual relationships, companionship, fellowship, all this kind of stuff. Listen, no single human being, no mortal being is qualified for that role. Nobody can live up to those standards. If you think my entire happiness is built around this person, I feel bad for that person in your life because that's going to feel like an undue weight. I can't do that for you. I'm not good enough. I want to be that for you. I'll try my hardest, but I'm human, I fail, I'm not good, and I can't, and I don't want you to be sad because of me, because I'm gonna drop the ball, man. I'm not gonna call when I say I'm gonna call. I'm gonna be late when I said I would be on time. Things are gonna happen to you. You're gonna be disappointed in me. And if your happiness in life and fulfillment rises and falls entirely on me, that's unfair to me, and it's really damaging if you realize it for you as well. After hearing Jacob's proposal, 7 years for Rachel, Laban realizes this guy is head over heels and decides to take advantage of this situation. So if you remember, his response is deliberately vague. You remember what his response is when Jacob says, 7 years I'll work for your daughter? He says, notice what he doesn't say. Okay, it's a deal, let's shake on it, we'll do the paperwork, let's figure this out. What he says is, it's better that you get her than some other man. Right? Which is like, okay, that's a statement, but it's not really a yes. Jacob wanted to hear a yes. So what did he hear? He heard a yes. Because later he says, what have you done to me? And then Laban's going to come back and I never said yes. What I said was, it would be a good idea for you someday to be married to my daughter. However, in our country, we do things differently than perhaps where you're from. But when you really, really want something, when it has the status of idolatry in your life, when it's like, oh, if I can just have that, then you'll hear whatever you want to hear in those moments in spite of everybody else being like, I don't think he's the right person. Well, you know what? You're not me. Thanks, Mom, for not approving of everything that I've done, right? I have some people are offering you some red flags, and you're like, you know what? Forget it. I love him. He loves me. She loves me, whatever. We're just going to go with it in this way, right? Laban throws a party. There's heavy drinking. There's veil over the face. This is traditional for them. The bride would have a veil over the face, so the identity would be a little bit hidden on purpose so that when she finally goes into her bride and she's revealed herself, she reveals herself in so many different ways, right, to the groom, in that way. There's darkness in the tent, and when Jacob wakes up, it's Leah, not Rachel. He went to sleep with a 10, and he woke up with a 2, guys. That's what happened. Some people call that freshman year at Wazoo. Other people, that's kind of what happens. And he's furious, and he goes to Laban, and he says, what is this you've done to me? And did Laban really think that he was going to get away with it? Laban said, it's not done so in our country to give the younger for the firstborn. Perhaps in Canaan, Jacob can usurp an Esau, but that kind of stuff doesn't happen here. The deceiver has become the deceived. And he looks at him and he says, you know what? I know your story. I know what came before. I know your reputation. Your reputation precedes you. You deceived your dad into like this blessing thing. you are a deceiver, and now you're the one being deceived, and now you're mad about it. Really hard for somebody who is operating that, who did all of this to get to this spot in life, and now you're mad that it's happening to you. The deceiver has become the deceived. And then point out the hypocrisy involved in all of this. In the same way that Isaac reached out in the dark to touch the person he thought he loved, so Jacob falls into the same exact trap. He finishes out Leah's bride week, as we mentioned, as we read through, promised me 7 more years of work, and I'll give you Rachel. Jacob agrees to this. And we now turn to the real casualty in this whole story, which is the person of Leah, right? Who from the very beginning it is shown is unloved by probably her dad, who is like, man, what am I going to do with you? You're going to be hard to marry off. Everybody wants to get to Rachel, but they have to get through you first, as is custom. So probably grew up feeling that way. The narrator tells us all we need to know about her in one significant detail. It says that she had weak eyes. I said we'd come back to that, which could mean a couple of things. One, it could mean she was just hard to look at, which is possible, or she had a wandering eye, and it was again hard to look at in that way. Both things could be possible in that moment, and again contrasted immediately with the description of Rachel, constantly living in the shadow of her stunning younger sibling. I never had an older brother, but I can't imagine what that would have felt like for him had he lived in the shadow of his younger sibling. She was the girl that nobody wanted. Leah had probably a hole in her heart, every bit as big as the hole in Jacob's heart. Everyone in this story is hurting. Everyone has something. They're all coping in life, and their coping mechanisms are different, but every one of them is like, I never felt loved by my dad, Jacob. I never felt loved by my dad, Leah. Laban, all this kind of like some sort of stuff that he's working on. He sees a young man who's in love and think, I can manipulate that. I can take advantage of the situation. They're all coping with something. Every bit as big as the hole in Jacob's heart, now she began to respond to it in the same way that Jacob did. She did to Jacob what Jacob had done to Rachel and what Isaac had done to Esau. She set her hope on getting Jacob's love. Here's what I'll do. Here's what's going to finally save me. Here's what I need. If only I could get this. If only I could get my husband to love me. You know what? Then it'll all be good. So here's what I'll do. I know what he wants. He wants offspring. He wants a kid to carry on his name. He keeps talking about this, promise that was made to his grandfather, and he got this blessing, and now it's going to be him to kind of bless the world through him. And there's going to be some sort of Messiah figure, and he definitely wants a son. He doesn't want this to die with him. If I could just have a son, then my husband will finally love me. She's trying to find happiness and identity through traditional family values, and having sons is the best way to do it, but it's not working. She keeps having these sons going, finally, my husband will love me. And then, nope, some more. Finally, my husband will come to love me, and finally my unhappy life will be fixed. And after every child, it doesn't work, and it doesn't work. And she's in pure hell, and it's only getting worse. The person she's most in love with is in the arms of the woman after 7 years. She's grown up in the shadow of her entire life. She keeps having kids. He keeps sleeping with her. And at this point, there'd be some people probably in the audience or at home going, Brad, I'm trying to find like the hero in the story, someone to emulate, right? And I'm struggling to find it. And that's because you're not going to find it in this story. In fact, the Old Testament and a lot of the Bible is filled with people who are broken, who are trying to fill holes in their life with wrong things, idolatrous things, even though they would never say idolatrous, but fulfillment, transcendence, purpose, meaning in life through this thing will finally give it to me, and it doesn't seem to happen. Heroes in the Bible are really hard to find. Most of the people in this thing are broken. When it comes to Jesus, then there's an exception. Those stories are easy to find the hero, but you're not Jesus, I'm not Jesus, and we can't identify in the story and be like, I think I see myself in the character of Jesus here. Nope, you're reading it wrong then. It's not you, okay? That's an incorrect, proper way, of doing this. All other religions have God on the top of the ladder, and the idea is that if you do right things, you can move up this ladder. But biblical faith gives us a God who's nothing like that. What we see time and time again are weak, broken people trying to fill the void in their life with coping mechanisms that aren't going to work, and then us being like this third party going, it's not going to work, it's not going to work, it's not going to work, right? And then us being like, haha, we close our Bible, we go out and we do the exact darn thing, and all the people who love us go, it's not going to work, it's not going to work. But this time for me it will, right? But I think I know most people delude themselves. It's my favorite Arrested Development moment for those of you who watch that show. Most people delude themselves into thinking that open marriage will never work, but it might work for us, right? No, it's not going to in this way. Throughout your life, or the moral of the story is that having good morals won't get you into the story of God's grace. Throughout your life, there's a constant cosmic disappointment. You're not going to live a wise life until you realize that, until you stop resting on this idea that as long as I get Rachel, then everything will be okay. No matter what we put our hopes in, no matter what we put our hopes in the morning, it's always Leah, it's never Rachel. That could be a line every week for the next couple of weeks as we go through it. It could be money, it could be this, it could be work significance, it could be this, blah, blah, blah. If we keep doing this and keep going down this road, you're going to wake up with Leah and it's never going to be Rachel, guys. I'm just telling you. C.S. Lewis wrote about something like this in Mere Christianity. His quote says, and it's an extended quote, it says, most people, if they have really learned to look into their own hearts, would know that they do want and want acutely something that cannot be had in this world. There are all sorts of things in this world that offer to give it to you, but they can never quite keep their promise. The longings which arise in us when we first fall in love or first think of some foreign country or first take up some subject that excites us are longings which no marriage, no travel, no learning can really satisfy. We're going to have those longings, but what do we do with those things? What kind of weight do we put into them? I am not now speaking of what would be ordinarily called unsuccessful marriages or holidays or learned careers. I'm speaking of the best possible ones. It's not just the failures. It's not just the failures to be like, oh, well, yeah, you've been divorced 3 times, so obviously you're struggling with this. It's even the ones who have successful marriages who are still frustrated with this, who still struggle with this, who are still in danger of putting way too much weight in this thing. I'm speaking of the best possible ones. There was something we have grasped at in that first moment of longing, which just fades away in the reality. I think everyone knows what I mean. The wife may be a good wife, and the hotels and the scenery may have been excellent, and may be a very interesting join or career or whatever, but something has evaded us. It just evades us. It's like holding on to water and just watching it go right through our hands. So you have a couple options. You have a couple of options when you realize that if you take this and you listen to this and you decide, even if you're not really religious, okay, there's some value in this for me. What am I going to do with this? You've got a couple of options to kind of move forward with this. One, when you find yourself reaching and grasping and longing for something and it just seems to not be able to fulfill, you can blame the things that are disappointing you. It's an option. It's this. It was him. It's her. It's this job. I thought was great. I thought we'd move here. I thought this would be fantastic. It's not. It's really hot. Really hot. Like, good God, what is going on here, hot? There's all kinds of things that we can blame. We can blame this and be like, not this, but this, right? Or we can blame ourselves. We can be like, man, I keep finding, like, you keep jumping from relationship to relationship or job to job or place to place, and I just can't seem to find anything that seems to work. And then somebody goes, what's the common denominator in all these things? And I realize it's me. I'm the common denominator. I'm in all of these broken relationships. Maybe it's me, right? It can be very, very cynical and very, very intrinsic looking and might be valuable to some degree. There might be some things that you need to work on in that way, but I don't think it's fully there, right? You can blame the world. You can be like, oh, this is just everybody. Everything's external. Everything is, the reason I'm struggling is because this whole system, it's a patriarchy, it's this, it's America, I get on Twitter, I'll talk about it, and I'll tell everybody else, and I'll follow people who agree with me and block the people who don't, right? And I can do that. That's an option. Or lastly, you can reorient yourself. You're in your source of hope, your meaning, and your fulfillment. You can be like, you know what? When it comes to the area of sex, relationships, love, marriage, blah, 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 all the stuff that goes along with that, I think that there's an incredible value to that. I think that marriage was designed to be an imperfect picture, but the closest we have on earth of what it feels like to be fully known and to be fully loved. And when it's operating its best, somebody who knows you with all of your flaws and still chooses to love you anyway, that's a little taste of what God does every single day. And he does it to perfection. They're imperfect, but it's close. Right? Or maybe it's not even close, but it feels closer than like the people you go and, do yoga with or whatever, right? So they don't really know you. They don't live with you. They don't see the flaws. They're not tied into the same things, investments in life as you are. And so it's different. But this is us saying, all right, in this moment, I'm going to reorient this. I'm going to choose to see this as something that is beneficial and helps companionship, love, all that kind of stuff, but I don't put like all of it. I'm not distraught if it goes away. I'm going to fight hard for my relationship. I'm going to fight hard for my marriage. Don't take that, don't take that lightly. But I don't expect from that person all of the senses of meaning and purpose and fulfillment. We're on the same journey. We're both heading towards the same thing. We're on the same path. We're together, but it's not fully reliant on this person. I don't put too much weight, and I apologize for those times when I've made you feel like my happiness is dependent on your ability to meet my needs. And that's unfair to you, and so I want to do better. C.S. Lewis concludes, if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world, or that I was made for something different, that it's not just this, and it's not just what I'm told it's supposed to be. Leah is the one person in this sad story who makes some sort of spiritual progress, although it's not until the very end that we begin to see it. It's interesting, again, that she calls out for Yahweh in her prayer. She gives birth to her son Judah, and this time she changes up her refrain. She doesn't say, now my husband will love me, now my husband will love me, now my husband will love me. She says, this time, no mention of husband or son, I will praise the Lord. This time, I will praise Yahweh. And she uses the personal name for Yahweh, which would be interesting because for them, God, even in a monotheistic culture, Elohim was the term that they would say, like the God that exists out there. Or if you're not particularly like a super religious person or a Christian or whatever, you would say the divine being or the creator, the sustainer of life or whatever, right? That's Elohim sort of language. And this is like, for her, no, this is Yahweh. Like, that God that was spoken of that I heard about from the grandfather, God, Yahweh God, I will praise him. She reaches out to a personal God of grace. It's a different declaration. There's no mention of husband or child, as I mentioned. It appears that she'd finally taken her heart's deepest hopes off of her husband and off of her children and said, it's not going to be any of these. It's going to be why my life is worth living. It's going to be beyond that. Jacob and Laban had been stealing her life for years, but the moment she did that, she took her life back. And her son Judah is the one chosen, fourth, fifth born of all of the kids, doesn't even follow the same pattern, to be the lineage of the Messiah. Judah would come, from Judah would come David, from David would come Jesus, and Matthew kind of recounts the genealogy at the very beginning of his thing and includes Judah in here. And it's as if God looks down at the woman who has unloved her entire life and he says, you are going to be the mother of Jesus. She's a prototype of how God is going to save the world. God isn't looking for people who've done enough to get in. He comes down and he fulfills the requirements for you. He's simply looking for people who recognize the source of true hope. And so for us, may we not live with the idol of relationships in our life. May we not think, I got to try harder. I'm the subject of somebody else's idolization of this marriage, and I've got to try harder to kind of earn this for them because their happiness is dependent on me. I can't do that. That's not me. I'm not good enough for that. I know that. God, if you can work with broken people, then I'm all yours. And the good news is God goes, just read. They're all broken, man. Every single one of them. That's the only thing I have to work with. So of course I can do it. And it's my grace, not your good living, that is going to provide your sense of fulfillment, sense of purpose, sense of divine being. So get off the idolization of relationships. They're there. It's a gift. I think marriage is a gift. I think it does make us better. I think the sharpening of somebody who knows us points out my wife, when my wife speaks and criticizes and critiques some of my attitude or shortcomings or my short fuse or something like that, that verbiage weighs differently than somebody else. When somebody filling out a Connect card, right? I don't even read these. No, just kidding. I do. I'm just kidding. But when she says it, I'm like, all right, I probably need to do something different, right? That's the beauty of it. But my life cannot be completely dependent on her. That's too much of a burden for her. And my prayer is that we be the type of people who see this, read this, think about this, reflect upon this, and be like, you know what, maybe for me, it does need to look differently too. Maybe I've lived with this. If I had, then I'd be fine. If that's not God, then it's always going to be Leah. It's never going to be Rachel. Let's pray. Father, our prayer is that you would help us think through some of these things in our life, that you would help us reflect upon these, grow upon these, and just just be the type of people who see this and see ourselves in the story in the right spots. Let us feel your love and your grace in our life in spite of our shortcomings. Let us find our identity in you and not what we do, including who we marry or who we're in relationship with. Give us the wisdom to know what that looks like in our life, the courage to do something about it in your name. Amen. Amen. All right, next week we're going to be continuing with part 3. In case you have to miss or travel or do whatever, as we mentioned, you can download the app and follow along with that, or go to eastlaketricities.com/talks. Inside of your program is a couple of things, 2 things. One is a Connect card. It looks just like this. If you are a guest with us, make sure to mark the box on the lower left-hand side. But for everyone, we ask you to give us as much personal information you feel comfortable sharing with us. It's the only way of tracking who has or hasn't been here for a while, especially coming out of COVID. It's kind of important for us. And if you are a guest, we donate money to an organization doing good things locally and globally. So mark that box so you know how much to donate at the end of the month. I believe this month is Second Harvest. I think that was what it was. On the back is a spot for some next steps. If you want to take some next steps in your faith or grow or join a base camp that's starting up in a couple of weeks, or have baptism. Maybe you heard Angelo's story today and you thought that should be me. I need to be a part of that. I've made a decision. I've never taken that step, and I'm inspired to kind of make my personal internal faith a public display, and kind of identify publicly. And it's a big deal. So we'd love to have you mark that, and we can be in touch there. On the bottom, spot for some prayer requests or life updates. This is all, you can fill these out electronically as well. There's a giving envelope. If Eastlake's home for you, this is your chance to help us out financially to continue to create a church. People don't typically like church. We couldn't do without all of the people who make this happen week in and week out. Thank you in advance for that. These can all go in the blue bins at the top of the ramp as you're leaving, and we'll make that happen. All right. 2 quick announcements, and then you're gone. One is our next back alley night is August 27th. It's going to be a concert right out on the other side of these doors. We've done 2 already. We've done a comedy night and a trivia night, and they've been awesome. This is our kind of summer finale, our way of saying thank you for being a part of this great invite a friend event. It's totally free and super chill. We've got Ninja Bistro coming doing food truck stuff. Moniker Bar's doing drinks. We cornhole, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of fun. And the weather should be just perfect. It's slowly getting cooler for us. I know it gets hotter this week, but I'm praying that it'll be nice out there in the back. So come that night. And then lastly, we have got a new service time. Doesn't affect you. If 10 o'clock is the one that you come to regularly, then nothing changes in September. But if you typically maybe bounce back and forth or are interested in, because football's starting an earlier time or whatever, starting at 8:30 on September 5th is that first Sunday. We are going to do identical services between the two, although kids will still only be at 10. But we're still working on some of that stuff. But identical services to be able to come to and check that out. So 8:30 and 10 starting September 5th. All right, would you stand? I'm going to read a closing benediction for you and then get you on your way. Lord, train us to hear your voice. When it is time to grieve, help us to grieve. When it is time to rejoice, help us to rejoice. When we grow weary, be the strength in our weakness, and may your most beautiful and perfect will, not ours, be done. Amen. May that go with you this week, whatever you're facing. We've got snow cones in the lobby for your kids. Make sure to remember to pick them up. If we've never met, I'll be in the lobby. Would love to say hello and put a name to a face.